Holy Sacrament, 4/10/09. This is a time of year where new beginnings are happening, and Jesus provided us with a new beginning. It was a special kind of new beginning, and I'd like to explain some details of the service before we do it. First off, Jesus never had a gold cup, a silver cup, or any cup of precious metals. The chances are that he had either a ceramic cup or a wooden bowl. These were travel items. These were things that he could put in his little duffel and bring with him wherever he went. The chances of it being a ceramic cup were lower because they were breakable. But at the Passover feast that was his last one, he probably had a ceramic cup as an offering from the person that was hosting it, that he was staying at their house. The wooden bowl, on the other hand, would have been a mainstay. He would have drunk out of it, he would have eaten out of it. So both are represented. It's important sometimes to understand that the things that we use in the sacrament need to have been made with the right attitude in mind. That's the cup and bowl. The bread, because it was a Passover feast, was unleavened bread. I like to use tortillas. They're already unleavened and they're kind of tasty. If you are having a sacrament at any time other than the Passover, an unleavened bread is not necessary. The Greek Orthodox that I have been friends with have used homemade bread, which I think is very interesting, and I like that. It's a good concept. But at Passover it is traditional to have an unleavened bread. Fruit of the vine. That's been a bone of contention with some clergy. One thing that people don't understand is that in that era it was very common for, let's call it, bacterial growth to be in water, and it was a serious health concern. So one of the ways that people dealt with it was to have an alcohol-based drink. It wasn't because they craved alcohol, it was because alcohol-based drinks didn't have anything growing in them. They were safe to drink. Children would have watered wine and adults would have regular wine. But fruit of the vine just means that it is fruit juice. Whether it's fermented or not is irrelevant. Because there are so many people that have developed a problem with alcoholism in many different cultures, I stick with the idea of grape or apple or some other juice. I think it's the thought that counts in this particular case, and not that it's alcoholic. There's another concept that was covered in the sacrament that I found very interesting. Traditionally, in the Jewish tradition, Elijah was going to return someday. The symbolism of Jesus being the homeless person showing up at your door, and if you let him in you would be blessed, etc. There was the concept of something called the empty chair. And it was the idea that a place of honor always be reserved for the guest, the person who showed up unannounced, who might or might not be an angel, Elijah, Jesus, or some other representative of God. So that is in the sacrament as well. The other concept was the idea that a blood sacrifice had been demanded, according to the scriptures, by God since Abraham's time. What it later became understood as was that the blood sacrifice was to grandfather in all those people, that was the only way they knew how to worship. So blood sacrifice was adopted to get people to understand that if you were going to have the blessing, you must give something to God. Our lives is adequate. But at the time, the only way to make it make sense was to have it be a blood sacrifice. Well, God didn't like the idea of blood sacrifices. So one of the things that evolved out of this was that Jesus had to become the last blood sacrifice, the last perfect sacrifice, so that no other blood sacrifices would be needed after that point. The last part deals with the idea of scapegoat. A scapegoat was meant as an offering to expunge sins. A lamb or a dove or some other smaller animal were considered family sacrifices. They were the things you did for the birth of a child, the death of a relative, celebrating a wedding, etc. But if you wanted the entire village's sins to be carried away and expunged from the record, you used a goat, a perfect young male goat, who basically every sin was written down and pinned to this poor creature, and he was driven out into the desert. Because no blade touched him, he was killed by God. He was accepted by God as the sacrifice for the village. Jesus became the perfect scapegoat in this way, except the village was the global village instead of just a collection of a few hundred people. Now, I would like to share with you a sacrament in the Church of Thomas tradition. We gather to worship the one with no name, who brought us out of bondage in Egypt. When Jesus broke bread with us for the last time, he left us with a gift to remember him by. When he gathered all of his students in the upper room, Jesus blessed the feast. God, please bless this food, that it be made pure and holy, though it was made with impure and unholy hands. And if it is within our hearts, make us pure and holy, so that we too can be a willing sacrifice. When he said this, he also said that he wanted to give them the gift of a way of understanding and inviting him to that empty chair. He said, I bless this wine, this fruit of the vine, in memory of the blood that will be spilled for you. Drink it in memory of me. And he raised the bread. And he said, this bread has been blessed. As it is broken, remember that it represents the body that will be broken for you. When you break bread in the future, remember me. When the bread was broken and the wine was poured and blessed, he passed it among his people and asked them to meditate on the idea of what he had said. It is important to understand that because with being a child of God comes responsibilities. This new beginning needs to be represented in the way that you carry yourselves and represent yourself to the outside world. God bless the whole world, no exceptions. Angel Eliza.